I'm 32, male, and I've worked hard to get where I am today. I own a small real estate business, live comfortably, and have a life I've built brick by brick. But if you told 20-year-old me I'd be here, I'd have laughed in disbelief. Back then, I was still reeling from being kicked out of the only home I'd ever known, a home that meant everything to me. See, my childhood wasn't glamorous, but it was stable. My parents worked blue-collar jobs and scraped by to keep a roof over our heads. That roof? A modest 3-bedroom house with a sagging porch and a backyard big enough to play catch. It wasn't much, but it was ours. My sister and I grew up there. Every corner held memories. Christmas mornings by the fireplace, the squeaky floorboards on the stairs, even the ugly wallpaper in the kitchen that my mom swore she'd replace someday. But that house wasn't just a house to me. It was the last thing tying us together as a family. When I turned 18, things started to shift. My sister, 2 years younger, became the center of their attention. Not just in a younger sibling way, but in a we'll move heaven and earth for her kind of way. I didn't mind at first. I was old enough to handle myself. But their priorities changed, and so did their attitudes toward me. By 20, I'd saved up a bit of money from my part-time job and was attending community college. I was still living at home, helping out where I could. Then, out of nowhere, my parents called me into the living room one evening. My dad leaned forward, avoiding eye contact, and my mom looked uncharacteristically stern. "We've decided it's time for you to move out," my dad said, his voice firm but detached. "What? Why?" I stammered, blindsided. "Well," my mom began, shifting uncomfortably, "your sister needs her own space. And frankly, you're an adult now. It's time you stood on your own 2 feet. It didn't feel like a discussion. They'd made up their minds. My sister had just turned 18, but apparently she needed a bedroom-turned-office/studio more than I needed a home. They gave me a month to find a place. The timing couldn't have been worse. My part-time income wasn't enough to afford rent, so I dropped out of school and picked up extra shifts. I moved into a dingy apartment with peeling paint and a leaky ceiling. My parents? They didn't check in. Not once. A few years later, I heard through the grapevine that my parents had sold the house. It stung. That home had been my anchor, and they'd let it go without so much as a heads up. The reason? To fund my sister's lavish wedding. When I say lavish, I mean it. A designer gown, a ballroom reception, a honeymoon in Europe. The works. She married some guy with deep pockets, so I couldn't fathom why my parents had to foot the bill. But they did. Every last penny from the house sale went toward making her big day perfect. I wasn't invited to the wedding. My sister and I weren't on great terms, but that sealed the deal. I buried myself in work, slowly building my business from scratch. Years passed. I heard bits and pieces about my family through mutual acquaintances, but we were practically strangers at that point. Then 3 years ago, I got a call from a realtor friend. The old house, my childhood home, was back on the market. Turns out the guy who bought it had fallen on hard times and was desperate to sell. I didn't hesitate. I snapped it up. Walking through those creaky doors again was surreal. The wallpaper was still there, though it had faded. The porch still sagged. It was like stepping back in time. I didn't plan to live there. I saw it as an investment property, but I did some minor renovations, spruced it up, and rented it out. Watching someone else live in the space where I grew up was strange, but it also felt like reclaiming a piece of my past. Fast forward to 6 months ago. I was sitting at my desk when my phone buzzed. It was a number I didn't recognize. "Hello, son, it's your father." I nearly laughed. We hadn't spoken in over a decade. "What do you want?" I asked flatly. There was a long pause. Then the story spilled out. My parents had fallen on hard times. My dad's health had declined, and my mom had quit her job to care for him. Medical bills had piled up, and they'd lost their apartment. They were homeless, couch surfing with distant relatives. And I prompted, already sensing where this was going. "We need a place to stay," he said, his voice small. "Just for a little while, until we get back on our feet." "You mean my place?" "Yes, your house." I sat back, stunned. The audacity was almost impressive. "Let me get this straight," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You kicked me out of that house so my sister could have an office. Then you sold it to pay for her wedding. And now you want me to let you live there? For free?" "It's not like that," my mom interjected. We're family. Families help each other. Funny, I don't remember you helping me when I needed it. Over the next few weeks, they tried every trick in the book. My mom left teary voicemails about how they were old and sick. My dad sent guilt-laden texts about doing the right thing. My sister even reached out, though her tone was far less conciliatory. You're being selfish, she snapped over the phone. Mom and Dad sacrificed everything for us. The least you can do is let them stay in that house. It's not like you're living there anyway. Oh, you mean the house they sold to pay for your wedding? That's irrelevant, she shot back. They're your parents. Show some respect. Her entitlement was staggering, but I wasn't budging. I told them they could stay if they paid rent, market rate, no discounts. They balked. We can't afford that, my mom cried. Then I guess you'll have to figure something else out, I replied. That's when the real dirty trick started. One day, I got a call from my tenants. They were spooked. Apparently, an older couple had shown up unannounced, claiming to be the owners. My parents had gone to the house, banged on the door, and demanded to be let in. I was livid. I called my mom immediately. What the hell are you doing? We were just... You scared my tenants. If you show up there again, I'll call the cops. She started sobbing, but I hung up. A week later, I got served. My parents were suing me for unlawful possession of the house. Their claim? That it was still legally theirs because it had been the family home. It was absurd. I had the deed, the purchase agreement, everything. But they were banking on me folding under pressure. Instead, I lawyered up. The case was laughable and got thrown out almost immediately. The judge even reprimanded them for wasting the court's time. Still, it cost me a few thousand in legal fees. The final straw came when my sister posted a long, ranting screed on social media. She painted me as a greedy, ungrateful son who'd abandoned his poor, helpless parents. She conveniently left out the part where they kicked me out, sold the house, and cut me off for years. The comment section was a mix of people sympathizing with them and others calling out the obvious holes in her story. I'd had enough. I sent my parents one last message. If you contact me, my tenants, or anyone else about this house again, I'll file a restraining order. We're done. They went radio silent after that. As of today, the house is still rented out, bringing in steady income. My parents? Last I heard, they're bouncing between motels, relying on my sister for help. She doesn't seem too eager to drain her husband's wallet for them, though. Do I feel guilty? A little, but mostly I feel justified. They made their choices, and now they're living with the consequences. Anyway, if you enjoyed reading about how karma comes full circle, don't forget to subscribe. You never know, I might have more wild stories to share.